Welcome to the mighty colloquium. It's a real pleasure today to have with us Greg Guidry, who's the Executive Vice President at Shell for Unconventionals, speaking about a topic that's really important today as we look to transitioning from today's energy systems to a much lower carbon footprint. Greg comes from my native state, from Louisiana. I promise not to tell any Cajun stories here. He did his undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering, I think at LSU, is that right? And in fact has been serving as chair of the Dean's Advisory Board in engineering at LSU. He began his career with Shell back in 1982. And in New Orleans, and has moved through a series of different management positions, senior management positions at Shell, ranging across deep water, onshore, and midstream businesses. Ultimately becoming in 93, I think, in 2013, the EVP of the Unconventionals business. It's a real pleasure to have Greg Guidry visiting us, and I welcome you to the podium, Greg. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Bob. No, thank you, Bob. And anybody who knows how to pronounce my name, my last name, has to have some connection to Louisiana, because it usually doesn't get it on the first try. But Guidry is the name, and I'm actually a Cajun, so. From the capital of Cajun country, absolutely. So for those of you who like the food, I just want to remind you there is a culture behind that food, and there are people that make up that culture, and I'm a proud member of that culture. It's deeply seated, and there's a lot of proud people that are part of that, and really do love the food. So. It's very good. So, no, it really is an honor to be here, Bob, and I appreciate the invite. The Shell relationship with MIT goes back quite some time, and I was able to spend an entire day here today, running through all the different streams of activity, some of which we're connected to, some of which we're not connected to, but it was really a fascinating day, and I just want to thank everyone who, I see a number of faces in the crowd that we met with today. I appreciate you taking the time to show me around. It's not often that a line leader in Shell that's running a business in Shell gets to spend this kind of quality time on campus, but it was certainly enlightening, and I got a lot out of it. So hopefully, you can get as much out of what I'm going to say, or some of the engagement we're going to have as I got out of the visit from you, because it's clearly a different vantage point when you're running a business out in the kind of out in the world. I was in Europe before I came in my current assignment. I ran the upstream business in Europe. Got a real good feel for sort of how business is done in Europe, and how various cultures and societal desires and needs in Europe, and now I'm here in North America doing a very similar business, but in a different cultural context. So hopefully you can get some out of it. So I'm going to have a few comments up front. Bob and I are going to have an engagement, but really I'm looking forward to the questions, and anything you want to talk about, I'd be more than happy to engage. Shell really does have an absolutely pivotal role to play in the energy transition. We are an energy company. We fully recognize that we are right in the midst of an energy transition, and undoubtedly the question is more around the pace. It's not a matter of when we will be fully on a renewable type of energy system. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when, and we want to play our role in that. We do continue to have something to offer, though, when it comes to energy, and that is a lot of some of the legacy business that we have. I'm going to talk a bit more about natural gas today in the context of the challenge, the whole energy transition challenge. but be happy to talk about other parts of our business. The other piece is, we really value collaboration. And I know that there's been lots of discussions on campus of late around collaboration and how that works and who you partner with. But I will say that we truly appreciate the high academic standard and the academic independence that this institution brings. And we truly value the collaboration. So I would like to keep that. With respect to collaboration, we've been part of funding R&D at MIT for quite some time. We've got lots of MIT graduates that work for Shell. A couple of them sitting in the front row. And we also have been a founding member of the MIT Energy Initiative, back in its founding time frame, and just renewed for another 5 years. So that's a key partnership. We also have Shell TechWorks. We call it Shell TechWorks here on campus, which is one of the innovation incubators that we're really excited about. It started up in 2013 and really generating quite a bit of interest in Shell. And so those things are all good. So in terms of talking just a bit about gas, to set context, I talked about the energy transition. The way I see it, I think the energy transition is one of the greatest challenges for society overall for this century. It is absolutely a huge challenge, and we're all in the energy business. I think we understand the magnitude of the challenge, because the key thing is, if we needed less energy, perhaps it would be a bit easier. But the reality is, we need more energy. We just need a hell of a lot less CO2. And so it makes it that much more of a challenge. The demand story you all know, but just to reinforce it, 60% increase in energy over the by 2050. That's just one generation, right? One generation driven by population increase. That's not, any of our estimates. That energy and the IEA kind of estimates. About a 30% increase in population. But the urbanization that just drives the thirst for all the devices and all the wonderful things that we know and love that consume energy. So about 75% of the world's population will live in cities by 2050. And the drive or the insatiable appetite for energy would be hard to squelch. So the other piece is the fact that today, about 1.2 billion people in the world have no access to electricity. 2.5 billion, about 30%, about a third of the overall population have no access to modern energy at all. So it's the demand part of the equation, I think, just reinforces how immense this challenge is as we're trying to reduce CO2. With respect to supply, efficiency obviously is the cheapest way, and it's something that we're focused on in Shell for sure. We've got energy management plans and efficiency drives in all of our assets, and certainly are working on technologies through fuel, engine fuels and those sorts of things to improve energy efficiency. But then it's about renewables, and it's about a very, very aggressive approach toward renewables, and what many of you are working on, trying to develop the technologies that makes renewables a much more affordable part of the energy mix. And of course, the biggest challenge being the intermittency that renewables brings, given the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. And that's of course a major challenge. And I'd like to hear your opinions in terms of the different views on how fast you think the technology is going to evolve to where it can be something that is truly reliable and truly something that we can depend upon. Because what's happened, over the same course of the last decade or so, is an availability of natural gas that no one predicted. We certainly didn't predict it. We didn't predict it. In fact, we're even having a hard time predicting the outlook today, and we're right in the middle of it, okay? And we can talk about that some more, but we continue to actually underestimate the outlook for gas. But it's here. It's largely centered in North America. It is extremely affordable, down to $2 an MMBTU right now, which makes my P&L look really bad, okay? But it's incredibly affordable. It's displacing coal, which is a great thing. And so emissions are going down, because you all know that natural gas has 50% of the GHG emissions as coal, as long as we can effectively manage fugitive methane emissions. And we can talk about that some more in the Q&A. The other fact, of course, is that renewables at this point represent such a very small part of the overall energy mix, and we need to get it up to about 50% of the power supply by 2050 in order to really manage global temperatures, which is absolutely an immense challenge. Hydrocarbons are 80% of the current energy supply, and so in one generation, to be able to come up with something that's actually going to eliminate the need for 80% of where you're getting your current energy in a matter of one generation, I think is probably unrealistic, and it's probably quite unaffordable for society in general. So I think the question for me is, and in terms of the engagement that we're having, is how can we utilize natural gas to actually enable or accelerate renewables, right? To instead of waiting or hoping on technologies to evolve in an incredibly quick fashion to address intermittency, how can we actually leverage natural gas to accelerate the transition to renewables? We have right now over 200-year supply of natural gas at current production rates. But I can tell you, knowing a lot about this business, that supply is likely to continue to grow, because we're very early in this whole shale business right now in a relative sense. Very, very early. And the technologies are just starting to evolve in order to get more of the gas out of the shales. So that I think it's highly likely the supply will continue to grow. So I think the challenge for me and the challenge for Shell, and frankly the challenge for society in general, is how can we continue to take advantage of something like natural gas and maintain or establish societal acceptance as it relates to managing methane emissions, managing induced seismicity, managing some of the things managing community impacts, because it's all of an onshore activity. Those are the kinds of things I spend a lot of time thinking about, and at Shell we spend lots of time improving and raising the bar for industry as we try to manage through that. That's the real, in my mind, the dilemma, and something that we're absolutely up for engaging in a very quality way to try and sort out how we can make the best use of that. So with that, let me pause on my comments. Yep.
Thank you. So thanks very much for those introductory comments and setting the stage. I'd like to just have a little discussion here to explore some of the factors that you brought up in your opening remarks, and get at some of the scale issues with natural gas. So how far can it get us? And price. You mentioned in your comments that we're down around $2 a million BTUs right now, which is good for displacing coal.
Right.
And so there's some interesting questions I think you must think a lot about on the plus and minus side about what happens as that price goes up or down further.
Right.
Would coal make a comeback? Do you think? What is the negative impact of those low prices on getting renewables into the system? So some of your thoughts on where we are with price let's take the U.S. To begin with.
I think, let me just say a couple of things. One is, I think that we do need a mechanism beyond just free market mechanisms to encourage the right things to happen. And so we at Shell are very much supportive of a price on carbon, and an effective carbon pricing mechanism. I think in terms of the dynamics between gas and coal, it would just drive the right behaviors with that kind of a mechanism in place. Without some some effective regulation, just the free market drive, I think, would probably allow coal to live on a bit beyond. When you think of the robustness of the gas in North America as it relates to kind of break-even pricing for gas, what kind of price level secures further supply, consistent supply. What we're seeing, and I mentioned it in some of the breakouts today, we're seeing a very dramatic drop in the break-even price, the full investment cycle break-even price for natural gas, because technology continues to evolve, particularly in these gas shales. And the other part is the shales that are liquid, the liquid-bearing shales, half of that on an energy equivalent basis is gas. So the actual running room in terms of overall gas resource is quite immense, and the full cycle break-even price is now below $2 an MMBTU, okay? Which just 18 to 24 months ago was probably something on the order of 3.25. Now it's dropped to below 2, and the learning curves in this business, which are very important because it's a very iterative business. You drill lots of wells, and you very much learn from the prior well as you roll through. And the learning curves right now are still quite steep. So I think there's potential for it to get well below 2. We're targeting $1.75 right now in my business for having full cycle break even on incremental natural gas investment. And I think that's well within reach. So I think the supply is quite long. I think it's quite robust. And again, I don't think there are any commercial or technical factors that actually are going to limit that supply. I think it's going to be societal acceptance. It's going to be, can we continue to manage it in a way that is acceptable to society in general, and acceptable to, obviously acceptable to industry.
Yeah, so do we have the infrastructure in place that we need in order to take advantage of that gas? So, a lot of the gas is down in the southern part of the U.S.
Right.
or Texas. That was the early gas. We have a lot in the Marcellus in Pennsylvania. But
Right.
Is there infrastructure will get that to where consumers are, or to where industry is that needs the gas for process heat, or
Right.
to where we need it for generation, for firming up intermittent renewables?
It's a bit of a mixed bag, and it's very much a regional story. Where in the areas of the country where there's been legacy conventional production, and there's lots of infrastructure in place, that's not we call it an evacuation issue. There's not an evacuation issue for that gas. Where there are issues, where there's more pipes, more pipelines and such that are required, is in the Appalachia region, because the Appalachia region is where that there's been quite a large amount of gas that has been discovered, and it's outrun the ability to evacuate. Right? It's outrun the ability to evacuate. It far exceeded any of the predictions that are required. And industry really does not invest in pipeline infrastructure until it's quite certain that the actual production is going to be there. And we're in that cycle right now. So, the fact is right now, the electricity prices in New York and Boston are quite a bit higher than the electricity prices in Pennsylvania. And the major reason for that is there's not the infrastructure to get the gas where it needs to be.
Yeah. So I think one interesting issue with natural gas is the heterogeneity of it, right? So we have benefited greatly in the U.S. from the shale gas revolution. Mm-hmm. Other countries don't have either the conventional gas or shale gas.
That's right.
Resources we do. I think about India in particular. So here's a very large developing country. They rely a lot on coal today, and they're likely to expand their coal power generation substantially as they bring more power and more electricity to their citizens. And it seems to me that there's a real need to get lower carbon resources to them quickly. Do you see opportunities there Well, what do you see around issues with developing countries?
Right. For developing countries that don't have much indigenous gas resource, it's all about LNG, and we've been in the LNG business since it was started. We were we kind of created that business back in the 60s, and so we are the largest LNG shipper in the world, and we just bought British Gas, so we brought BG, who was like number 3, and so we have a huge LNG business. Exports from North America are certainly envisioned to feed some of that LNG business, and the likes of India and China and Japan are certainly major markets, for that gas. So the price differentials at this point are, because of the world is a bit flush in energy supply right now. Some of the price differentials, depending on which country you're talking about, it's hard to justify, very large infrastructure investments for LNG export terminals. And there are many projects for North America right now that are in the planning stages that are kind of nearing sanction, and question mark, are they really going to get sanctioned at this point? Because the global LNG price has come down with the oil price, and the differentials have tightened up quite a bit. But yeah, that really is the opportunity. Can we get gas in places that need gas without impacting the price of gas here in North America? Yeah.
That was going to be my next question. Is what impact does the LNG export business from the U.S. have on our prices domestically? Is that a concern? Would that impact gas substitution for coal in our electricity markets? Is there some negative impact there? Or do you?
Yeah, well, there have been a number of studies that have been done on that. I think many of those studies probably need to be refreshed because the whole global energy market dynamics are quite different than any would have predicted just a couple of years ago. But the studies that have been done and tied to some of the FERC decisions around approving some of the gas exports, have said that it's not going to have a material impact on gas price. And I would say that since those studies were done, there's just been more and more supply that's been uncovered, particularly in the shale gas. So the supply is quite long. The supply is quite long. Mm-hmm. And the ability to respond to demand is fairly quick because, again, it's all onshore kinds of activities that it's just a matter of the rate with which you drill the wells can be scaled up and down to feed that demand.
So lots of shale gas development in the U.S., North America. Yep. We understand the resource here quite well. How about our neighbors to the south, South America? Is there big development going on there? Will that help them as they shift off of coal and to more renewables? What do you see as the opportunity in South America?
Yeah, in South America, we see an industry right now sees kind of Argentina as, in terms of onshore development, the most attractive. Argentina right now has got a major energy imbalance. They import from Bolivia and LNG imports, and it's really challenging their economy greatly. And so, particularly the new government that's come in has been putting in a lot of the policy and the incentives to encourage indigenous gas development, and there is quite a bit of gas resource in Argentina, particularly in the shale, in this Vaca Muerta shale that many of you may have heard about down in Argentina. It's probably the most attractive shale outside of North America in a global context, and so I think that one in South America is probably going to be very high on the list. Mexico, question mark, right? Mexico, it's got the constitutional changes in order to attract outside investment. Is going through a series of licensing rounds, started with the offshore and going to work their way over into the onshore. They're saving the unconventional round for last, and they continue to delay it. So we don't really know when it's going to happen, but it's it's going to actually be a very, very tough country to be able to do onshore operations in a way that there'll be some serious risk management in terms of being able to operate in onshore Mexico in a way that is in a way that's acceptable in terms from a risk management standpoint. Yeah. So I think that's going to be a burden. The geology is very nice, right? But the actual the country risk is going to be quite difficult.
Yeah. And is there infrastructure in South America, Mexico in particular, for distributing large gas resources, or is that something that has to be developed yet as well?
Yeah, it depends on the scale of development, but it definitely needs additional infrastructure. Argentina needs additional infrastructure as well. Yeah, and it just depends on the pace of activity, the pace of development in terms of how acute those needs are. Exports into Mexico require additional infrastructure as well, and I think that'll probably be some of the near-term opportunities to be looking at.
Yeah. So the opportunity for natural gas to help us move to low carbon energy is really great. Mm-hmm. But there are some potential showstoppers out there on the horizon that you alluded to in your opening remarks that we absolutely have to get right, if we're to take advantage of the gas. So you mentioned, for example, fugitive emissions from methane, induced seismicity from fracking or from wastewater injection. Mm-hmm. Can you say something about what kind of progress have we made there? Are we getting good at detecting fugitive emissions, finding out where the big leaks are, fixing those? What do you see as our ability to respond to those challenges for gas?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, the industry has certainly improved in terms of the amount of emissions, over the last several years on fugitive emissions. Gas production in North America has increased by 40% over the last 10 years, and methane emissions are actually down, okay? But it's still not down to a level that is fully doable with existing technology, right? And we see that in our own operation. There's no technological hurdle with reducing fugitive emissions. It's more of a question of standards. It's more of a question of, in some cases, regulation if necessary, because it's just a matter of managing very, very minor leaks in the system over an incredibly broad and expansive type of system. And so we have our own internal standards where we actually do a lot of proactive monitoring with infrared cameras and much closer monitoring of some of the things that in the past, and 10 to 15 years ago, you weren't really even paying attention to, because it's not a personal safety issue, it's not an asset integrity issue, it is a climate issue, right? And that is something that has certainly brought about a raising of the bar as it relates to operational standards. And as you know, with the EPA coming out with more regulation around this, we in Shell are in good shape in terms of our standards, and we are doing everything that we can do to influence the practices of industry and also to influence regulation to better improve and to get this under control. Even at the current leak rate, it's still much better than coal, okay, in terms of the overall emission, but it can be much better, and without any of the technological challenges that we would have, say, on some of the technological challenges in renewables right now in terms of managing, intermittency, as an example. With respect to induced seismicity, that's absolutely a controllable item. The induced seismicity that we're seeing in the U.S. right now tied to produced water injection, particularly in Oklahoma and other places, you're already seeing substantial drops in the induced seismicity now that the regulator has stepped in and started to be much more proactive around regulating that kind of activity. The induced seismicity tied to the actual fracking process, because, obviously the fracking process, we're cracking rock, which is inherently seismic, right? That is a seismic activity, cracking rock. The question is, are you creating seismicity that's actually felt at the surface and actually impacting the lives of the community, impacting the integrity of structures and that sort of thing? That is not happening right now tied to fracking. Certainly in Oklahoma, the magnitude of the seismicity in Oklahoma was starting to get to the point where it was affecting structural integrity. But again, that's produced water injection. You just got to quit injecting, right? Tied to fracking in the Canada right now, there's an area, the Duvernay Shale, you guys may have seen that, where some of the high intensity fracks that have been executed were starting to create some induced seismicity. But again, it's just a matter of backing off on the intensity and being very, very cognizant of the way you're managing the operation so that you're not creating felt seismicity. You're not creating felt seismicity at the surface. I can tell you in Shell, we have our own internal standard that we put in place several years ago. And in all of the activity we have in North America, we've drilled thousands of wells and fracked thousands of wells, and we inject lots of produced water. We have not had a single induced seismicity event across the totality of our operation. But it requires a very, very disciplined risk management and adherence to operating procedures because we know how to prevent it. We know how to prevent it, and it's just a matter of executing according to standard. Yeah.
Good. So you mentioned regulation in your comments just then, and I thought I would go to the last question about policy.
Yeah.
And we've covered a lot of the positives that can come from gas and some of the downside that we have to manage. Can you speak a little bit to what you see as opportunities or challenges with potential policies coming down the road, either to help us get more of the good stuff or limit the downside and risks with methane leaks, for example?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mentioned carbon pricing. I think certainly from a policy perspective, carbon pricing is something that I think is needed and something that I think would certainly drive the right path. I would certainly not go down the route of trying to pick technologies or pick winners and losers with overarching policy that would be trying to do that. I would let market mechanisms drive the choices through a price on carbon. The second thing is on methane. I think that some of the regulations that are being promulgated around fugitive emissions and methane emissions, I think can be very effective, particularly when they're tied to some of the existing regulations around ozone containment, because they're very complementary in terms of VOCs and ozone and methane in and around the operations that we have. Avoid conflicting regulations, right? Because that puts additional burden. That puts additional burden on governments, additional burden on industry, additional cost for consumers, and actually doesn't effectively get the outcomes you're looking to get. So we're very exposed right now to a lot of conflicting regulation because there have been so many different regulations that have come out here in the last several months, and really thinking through those potential overlaps, because there are some very, very real conflicting overlaps. And then as it relates to seismicity, absolutely, we know how to prevent it. And so it's a matter of the states, which are the primary regulating body around oil and gas operations, the states stepping up and actually enforcing, in many cases, existing regulation, but also industry continuing to raise the bar in terms of our own standards.
Good. Yeah. Thank you. So I'd like at this point to shift and invite questions from the audience. We have two microphones here in either aisle. If you'd like to step forward to the mics and ask a question. The one thing I would encourage is that you make it a question and have a brief directed comment if you want, but a short question. Thank you.
Greg, thanks so much for coming to speak to us. My name is Jack. I'm from Harvard Kennedy School. You spoke a little bit about demand, both right now and in terms of going forward to 2050. I was wondering if you can speak more about demand side of things in terms of current breakdown, penetration, and going forward when the infrastructure gets invested, how does demand look like both inside the US, North America, and globally? Thanks.
Yeah, we're primarily focused on global demand because we're a global company and we're in a very much a global economy, and we manage our entire production volume and supply on a global basis. We have a very prominent trading organization that is completely focused on global demand. Where you're going to see most of the demand is in the developing countries, and in terms of global demand. And many of you know this, but it's in the population growth. A couple of billion folks over the next 35 years, a couple 100,000 people a day, right? That are primarily and a move to urban settings. Because in order to get access to modern energy, the populations are going to continue to move to urban settings and to move to cities. In China right now, those of you who are from China, you know this, the number of cities that are being established in China, in India, the number of cities that are being established is pretty remarkable. There's a city on the order of a Boston, established. Whoops. Hello. Somehow the screen turned our mic off. I'm not sure what happened there.
Who's got the AV back there?
Hello? No? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? You can still hear me, okay. So I'm not sure if we did anything, Bob.
That happens at the end of the day sometimes.
Oh, I see, okay.
The whole system
just
resets,
happened.
right? Okay.
Okay, all right, good. Yeah, so the 75% of the population live in cities at the middle of the century. So the question is, how is efficiency going to play in? And that's a huge uncertainty. And what is that efficiency function going to look like? And many folks that do a lot more work in it than I do can tell you their feelings about that. But then it's also going to be, how do we manage some of the painful choices about how, if we actually get to the point of limited supply, of who doesn't get the energy? I'm not sure how we manage that. That would be very, very tough. That would be very, very tough.
Good. So we just made the point here of unintended consequences in the things we do. So if you raise the screen, you lose microphones.
Yeah.
But
right.
Interesting.
Right.
Yes.
I'm David Su. I'm a professor of urban planning here at MIT. I have a question. If natural gas is our bridge to kind of a more renewable future, past 2050 or 2060, we want to be at a higher percentage of renewables. What does that mean for the rate of investment or return on investment for what might be relatively short-lived energy assets of natural gas?
Yeah, the actual life cycle on assets is actually not quite that long. Most of the just talk about my business. Most of the infrastructure I invest in my business, is in the order of maybe a decade or two, right? So you're not talking about the actual payouts, the payouts associated with incremental investments in my business on the order of 2 to 3 years, okay? So it's actually a very, and that's the attractiveness of this business, because it's an incremental activity for the most part. It's not like the large, deep water, huge investments that are required in some of the downstream or some of the other elements of the upstream. So it very much is an incremental business. These pipeline investments are fairly large investments, but again, those are typically amortized over a 15 to 20 year type time frame. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Yes.
This is kind of tall. So my name's Linda, and I'm a first-year MBA at Sloan. My question is actually pretty tangential to the one that was just asked. So I'm very curious about the sort of long-term effects of these short-term decisions. Like natural gas is the bridge fuel to renewables, and hopefully we do transition to actual renewables. But, with this long supply stack and sort of the sort of larger, I'm just afraid of, what the sticky inertia may be for us
Right.
sort of focusing now on natural gas and whether that might be slowing or hindering the growth of renewables.
Right, right. No, and I think that's why there's a lot more collaboration required. Because I think it's probably fears on both ends that probably keep us from actually collaborating to the degree that we need to collaborate. I just think we're at a moment right now where we have more gas resource than in my career in 34 years in North America. Okay, I've never been at a point in my career where we've had this much gas resource, and it's driven a competitive advantage as it relates to energy that is driving jobs. It's driving a manufacturing renaissance in North America. The cost of electricity in North America is 35 to 50% less than Europe right now. That is a huge, huge competitive advantage, right? And so the question is how do we play that advantage into the energy transition? Yeah? So in my mind, it's not an either or, it's an and, but there's an awful lot of clever people that need to sort out how to best take advantage of that. Because to say that we can afford as a country to exclude a low-cost, relatively clean energy source is pretty presumptuous at this point, I would say. And it would say that with an $18 trillion debt, I'm not so sure we can be that that cavalier about it. So it's what are we willing to trade off in terms of healthcare, education, other social needs, if we are to say we absolutely don't want to try and take advantage of this, frankly, evolution of supply that no one really predicted, no one really expected, and not even the experts, right? I mean, I've been in the energy business for 34 years, and I can tell you, 15 years ago, this was not on the radar. This was absolutely not on the radar. So I think it's a question. It's not a battle in my mind. It's just a question. You've got an incredibly low-cost source that, certainly with CCS becomes quite an interesting and perhaps affordable and competitive path that actually, in my mind, has the potential to actually accelerate some of the renewables by dealing with intermittency sooner than other technologies can. By dealing with intermittency in a way that other technologies can't right now, and the question is, when will they be able to deal with intermittency to really allow renewables to flourish?
So natural gas certainly can be effectively a storage system for us.
Absolutely.
For intermittent renewables today.
And it's a much lower cost, kind of quote unquote storage mechanism.
But a question I think about, and maybe you're thinking about this too, is that in order to make sure this is a transition, if you look ahead, we have natural gas, half the carbon footprint potentially of coal. At what point do you see in Shell's long-range planning that natural gas has too much carbon, right? Yeah. So you go factor 2 down, but at some point even that's too much, and you have to go to CCS or something else.
That's right, and that's why we're putting an awful lot of resource and effort and R&D and collaboration actually with MIT and CCS, and we've had some recent success. We've got our first full-scale CCS operating in Canada right now, 1 million tons a year, about equivalent to about 200,000 cars off the road. That's knock on wood, It started up here about 3 or 4 months ago, and it's actually doing well. It's doing quite well. So still too costly. Still too costly. It's about $100 a ton. It's about $100 a ton, which is way too costly in terms of a CCS solution. But we are, we certainly are going to continue to put focus on CCS and working with many technology institutes around the world.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg, it sounds like the last two questioners don't actually believe you, but
Okay.
Anyway. Earlier in the discussion, you characterized fugitive emissions as not a local health issue and as due to minor leaks in the system. Yet in Aliso Canyon in California, there was a giant leak with 1 million barrels per day of natural gas escaping into the atmosphere,
Right.
and 1,700 people having to be evacuated.
Right.
I'm hoping you can defend your statement about this being minor and about this being not local.
Yeah, what I meant, that was not a fugitive emission. That was a major operational snafu, okay? That was an integrity issue with the operation. That was a non-recurring major, unwanted event, right? What I mean by fugitive emissions are the ongoing fugitive emissions in the ongoing operation that really, does generate very, very substantial volumes, spread out over very, very large areas that we need to manage. What happened in Aliso Canyon is, absolutely, completely, totally unacceptable, and it was an integrity issue with a wellbore that should not have happened. Yeah, it absolutely should not have happened.
Is there any guarantee that with additional extraction this won't continue to happen?
I don't know of any energy source that can guarantee no impacts, renewables or any. There's not a single energy source that can guarantee no impacts, right? Wind, solar, you name it. And if you have someone that's guaranteeing no impacts, talk about should you believe them? I think you ought to, really, really do need to talk it through.
Thank you.
There's not, energy just of its nature is, the generation of energy is in many cases creates hazards, and we need to manage those hazards very, very effectively. And anyone who is guaranteeing no risk or near zero risk is just not being credible.
Thank you.
Yeah. And as it relates to your prior question or challenge of who do you believe, I'm really not into should you believe me or not. I'm into offering a solution and offering offering the integration of that solution into optimizing our path to ultimately a climate that's acceptable, right? And so it's not a matter of who believes who. It's just a question of, is it, do you believe someone who says that you can, with 100% renewables starting out next year, you can actually get to where you need to get with zero hydrocarbons? Do you believe that?
I don't think that I would characterize that as my position.
Well, but I'm just talking about in terms of who believes who. I'm just talking about who believes who. There are folks on both sides of the aisle that actually are putting stuff out there that I think that needs to be questioned, and I think we need to actually get in the room and talk about it, and not position it in such a way that's so polarized. Because I think the reality is that in order to have an orderly transition, an orderly, affordable transition, we really, really do need to tap into many, many, many different sources of energies and figure out how to manage through that transition. Yeah.
I do think you've set up a bit of a straw man there, but I appreciate the answer to your question.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi there. My name's Alex. I am an RA at the MIT Energy Initiative, and my research is on space conditioning. I'm wondering what role you imagine that natural gas will play in the space conditioning sector, and if there are any promising natural gas technologies that you believe will play a more prominent role than it does right now.
When you say, could you explain space conditioning to me?
Space heating, residential heating,
Oh, yeah.
building
yeah.
heating, essentially, HVACs, the like.
Yeah. There, I think some of the areas that I think that the question is, part of it is some of the microgeneration and some of the things that are happening in that space, I think are amenable to gas solutions. In terms of the actual HVAC technologies, I'm not keeping up with that much at all, okay? But in terms of getting micropower and getting power to places that it's needed, I think that some of what we're doing in our gas to liquids processes to be able to get gas in different forms, in different places for power distribution without, particularly in some of the developing countries, I think is some areas that that we're certainly interested in. The actual technologies of actually, the heat and cooling cycles and such, I'm not close to that.
Thank you.
All right.
Certainly taking advantage of what we learned about combined heat and power or cogeneration plants. As big cities are built, that's the time to put in that sort of infrastructure. And so there's a huge opportunity there. It's a good point you make. Yeah.
That's right, and I think the microturbines and not just duplicating what we have here in North America is certainly
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
opportunity.
for sure. Yes.
Emeka is my name. I'm a fellow here at MIT, and I want to ask, what role is Africa playing in this energy transition? Because, for example, I know that Shell has a lot of offices in Africa, for example, in Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
You could own the only LNG plant in Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
And this company used to supply natural gas, LNG, to America at some point, but now it has gone down. So I want to know what role, for example, is your Shell Nigeria going to play, that will benefit that environment, Are you playing a role
Right.
in Nigeria to benefit that environment?
You're talking about the whole of Africa?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, you were saying, go ahead and finish?
Sorry?
Are you finished with your question?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, no, we've been in Africa for quite some time. We have, as you say, a very, very large LNG operation in Nigeria and exporting LNG out of Nigeria to different parts of the world. We're going to continue with that. The other thing that we certainly are doing in Nigeria is doing everything that we can to improve the conditions as it relates to certainly the operations in Nigeria, and it is a very, very difficult thing. But we feel that what we are doing is, the alternative would be for us to leave the country, right? And I don't think that would necessarily be good for anyone. That certainly our Shell Nigeria employees, do want us to be there and to be a force, what I would consider a force for good, in terms of trying to improve the conditions in country, in what is a quite difficult conditions in the country overall. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joy from MIT Sloan. So question also related to developing market. So for China's market, because of the Chinese commitment on CO2 reduction, so I assume like the natural gas consumption will increase dramatically in the following decades. So what do you think the potential opportunities and challenges in China's market? Could you talk a little bit both on the LNG market and the unconventional natural gas in China? Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for the question, and we're very active in both. We're quite active in the unconventional opportunities in China, and we also are quite active in directing LNG, to China. In fact, a number of our North America LNG exports, would be targeted to Asia and to China. But I will say the unconventional gas, the shale gas in China has been very, very difficult. I don't think that the Chinese government at this point is pleased with the way that the shale gas opportunity has evolved. It's been quite difficult. Had a conversation with some of the folks during the day today about that very subject. It's been a tougher nut to crack, I would say. Not a lot of information just in general in terms of seismic and well control. So you're starting with a very, very, very large country and trying to find a needle in a haystack in terms of shales that actually would be very, very attractive. So right now we've been pursuing shale gas in China for several years now, and I would say that we are at a very slow pace at this point, very, very slow pace, monitoring the overall performance and deciding at what point to what to do next, frankly. But yeah, we've been quite active in the shale space in partnership with PetroChina in country.
So in this regard, do you mean like Shell will put more emphasis on LNG market in China than like the shale gas because it's like more
that's the
potential?
alternative. If China can't really accelerate its unconventional onshore resource, then its alternative is to import more LNG. If it's going to stick to continue to displace its coal and its reliance on coal, and then it's also got, of course, pipeline imports from the other end of China that it's also pursuing as well. So pipeline gas coming in, LNG coming in, and then trying to make the most of the unconventional resource, which has been very much slower than what I think was hoped for.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So 3 more? Is that okay?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Good. So we'll do these last 3 questions. Yes.
Hi, Greg. My name is David. I'm a graduate student in the earth sciences here at MIT. I just wanted to ask if you could speak to maybe the reasoning behind and some of the lessons learned from Shell's exit out of the Haynesville Shale.
Okay. Yeah, what we did, he's talking about the Haynesville Shale, which actually is in my home state, Bob's home state of Louisiana. Just much like any portfolio, we manage a portfolio, an upstream portfolio, and in some cases you end up in really good positions. In some cases you end up with not so good positions. Where we ended up in the Haynesville was in what we call a tier 2 position. The Haynesville generally is a higher cost shale. The wells are more expensive. The pressures are much higher. If you're not in the very, very best part of that play, then you actually, you're going to, we call it, be a price taker, right? Because you're just not going to be at the right spot on the supply curve. And so that's where we found ourselves. So we were able to sell it to someone who actually it fit better with their operation. So the lesson really is, I think the lesson is we're glad we got out when we did, because there's no amount of operational improvement that can overcome what we call bad rock. Yeah, if you don't have a tier 1 type of accumulation, then there's hardly any amount of operational excellence that can overcome the fact that the geology is just not what it needs to be. Okay, so we sold out and we ended up doubling down on some of the other plays that we're in. Yep. So I think the lesson is just make the call when you need to make the call, and the other element, of course, is if you're not in very, very early in some of these plays, then it's very, very hard to be in the tier 1 kind of opportunity. And we were kind of in the Haynesville a bit late.
Thank you.
Hi, well, thank you for the comments. My name is Enrique. I work in digital learning here at MIT. And given that climate change is becoming a reality faster than expected, the melting of the ice is kind of unexpectedly faster, and the impacts are going to be greater. And you working in a major producer of energy that actually spews carbon into the atmosphere, what's your personal call to action every day that you go to work? Like, you see this impacting everywhere. You see, Florida and Miami getting day floods, tide floods. Thinking about buying property in Miami, and you're like, what do you think about this impact that every day you're contributing to?
Right. Well, first of all, and I really appreciate the question. I mean, first of all, it's what am I doing in my own personal behaviors, right? What am I doing to conserve energy? What am I doing to to be efficient in my own personal life. That's one. And by the way, my home is actually right, right near sea level. I'm actually on stilts because I'm actually on a swamp. And so, I have a very much sensitivity to sea levels and the impact it would have in terms of accommodation. The other part, though, and the more serious part of your question is, what am I doing in my professional life? And why would I ever work for a Shell, continue to work for a Shell, if we're going to continue to our primary business is hydrocarbons? And the way I would see it, again, is it's how can we contribute to the energy transition, okay, if we need more energy and less CO2? If we needed less energy, then I would say, geez, boy, we ought to probably shift pretty quickly to doing something other than what we do. But we need more energy, right? Unless I'm willing to say that there are folks in the world that just don't deserve it or shouldn't get it, or somehow we come up with thinking about a way to ration it in a fair way, right? So if the belief is that we're going to actually need an and solution, we're going to need to continue to reduce the intensity of hydrocarbons either through CCS or through more use of natural gas, then for me personally, it's how does my business, how does what I do actually do that in a most effective way? The way I actually, the expectations for my business as it relates to its standards around reducing the impact on, fugitive emissions, on seismicity, on the impact on communities, continue to raise the bar and stay way ahead of what the sort of the average behavior would be in our industry. I can do that, and I am doing that. Okay, so for me, it's around it's around how can the legacy energy business actually help to affect an orderly transition. I'm promoting carbon pricing. My company's promoting carbon pricing. There aren't a lot of companies out there doing that. I'm proud to be working for a company that actually is very proactive in its promotion of the things that are going to drive the behaviors more toward lower CO2. Okay, so those are the kinds of things that go through my mind. Unless you assume that there's a way that we could completely wean ourselves out of hydrocarbons in a matter of 20 years, but frankly, I would say that at this point, at this juncture, that would be an incredible scenario that I don't know that would make a lot of sense at this point.
Thank you.
Fair? That's good.
Hi, Greg and Bob. My name is Eliza Pan. I work at Amazon Web Services, and I'm wondering how you learn about and evaluate new technologies and what the process for planning rollouts are.
Yeah, no, that's a huge question, and there are many experts in the room that know a lot more about that than I do. But I can tell as a business leader,
right, exactly.
as a business leader, Shell has got a legacy of technology and innovation and working with institutions like this. One way we do it is partner with academia, right? We have Shell TechWorks on campus right now. I don't know how many are familiar with Shell TechWorks. We established it in 2013. We've got about 40 people in a building on campus that is an incubator for developing solutions that can be implemented in the business very, very quickly, okay? So as a business leader, I pay attention to that, right? I pay attention to that, and I make sure that what they're doing is relevant, is relevant to my business and is something that I can actually create value with in a very reasonable time frame. The other thing I do is I make sure that I'm creating space for doing trials, right? If we don't do enough trials in the business, then that's very, very difficult to get technology implementation in a reasonable time frame. And I can tell you, when you're running a business, dealing with very low chance of success technologies that have long-term benefits is very, very hard sometimes to fit into budgets It's very, very hard to say, hey, I'm going to use the rig to drill a couple of wells that may not contribute anything to the bottom line. They may, but they very well may not. It's a very, very hard thing to do. So trying to manage the overall priorities in the organization to do those trials and to create space for budget and for people to pay attention to the longer term is something that we do a lot of.
Mm-hmm. And is there something in particular you think that researchers and these teams can do to help you make those cases when you're trying to, as you say, slot it in to figure out how it fits into the bottom line?
The big thing is understand the business you're doing innovation for, right? And in many cases, and I think you guys have probably experienced that, where do you really understand the end-to-end business that you're actually doing technology for? Yeah, and do you really understand the way value will be created or destroyed on the basis of that technology working or not? Yeah, do you understand that, right? Are you just kind of focused on that one particular bucket, that one particular area? In some cases, there may be unintended consequences associated with that success that may erode value in other places, and you need to understand that, right? So I would say understand the business. Doing assignments in the business is something we try to do with as many of our researchers as we can. And if you guys have, particularly the younger staff that are here, you have opportunities to actually work in the business and then cycle back to the lab. I think that is a huge experience for many folks.
Thank you.
Yep.
I think we need to stop there because we've gone over with questions, and I'd like to thank the audience for a lot of great questions. Do you want to make any closing remarks or?
No, I just to reinforce that thank you. I really appreciate that. I mean, in some cases, you say, I know the perception when an oil and gas company, walks into this kind of an engagement. There are many perceptions out there, but I would, I would like to think that what we're bringing to the conversation, what we're bringing to the engagement, the resource that we bring to try and advance technology or advance our capability as it relates to the energy transition is something that truly can be collaborative and something that truly can create a better solution in the end, because that's what we're all looking for. So I appreciate the engagement.
Good, and thank you all for good questions. Thanks for a great presentation. Good. Thanks.